Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Assembly's SAP Review Committee meeting. And before we get started, I want to just talk a little bit about what this committee is all about and tell you what the mission statement is, even before we do introductions, okay? Chairman Trainee established this committee, and the mission of this committee is to meet monthly in conjunction with the Assembly's Budget Finance Committee to review the SAP implementation progress with the SAP Executive Steering Committee. And this committee will also review proposed funding requests and contracts before they're submitted to the Assembly for approval. And I just wanted everybody to be clear on what our mission was and why we're meeting and why we're going to continue to meet until the implementation launching of SAP. With that said, we'll do introductions and we'll start over here.
Glenda Gibson, and currently I'm the acting project sponsor for SAP.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Elvie Gray Jackson.
Dick Train Assembly.
And Zig, the Assembly's contractor, is on the phone, and Jennifer Johnson, who's also a member of the committee, is on the phone. And I'd like for, and Amy just entered, Ms. Domboski is also on the committee, and I'd like to have introductions from everybody in the audience.
Mike Chadwick, Internal Audit.
John Haddon, Purchasing Office.
Jacqueline Halford, Benefits. Anna Kartansky, Deputy CFO.
Tim Bernhardt, SAP Synergy Project.
Bethel Stein, SAP Synergy Project.
Diane Thompson, Resource Data. I'm a non-voting member of the Executive Steering Committee.
Kim Hart, Deputy Project Manager for Synergy.
Tom Dale, SAP Program Manager for Synergy.
Richard Banks, Telecom.
Ashley Casey, Telecom.
Nathan Pankett, IT Systems Analyst. Project.
Terrence Pearson, I'm Systems Division Manager at Municipal Light and Power.
Troy Swanson, acting CIO for the IT department of Brick City.
Deborah Kelly, ADM.
Bill Fulton, Municipal Attorney.
Amanda Moser, Clerk's Office.
Cindy Becker, Central Payroll.
Tom Green, Controller, Construction Steering Committee.
Whole company, CDPM, Finance and Logistics, Project.
Dan Moore, Treasury, Functional Safety.
Thank you. And this young lady right here, I can't remember what your name was, but did you say you were on the Executive Steering Committee?
I'm a non-voting member of the
Okay, but you're on the committee, right? Could you please join us? And I would like to also ask our municipal attorney to please join us. Bill Fossey.
And we do have a few other members and non-voting members in the audience.
I'd like for them to join us.
Does Mr. Briggs, Tom, and Kim are all identified as a
Please join us.
Elvie, do you want Executive Steering Committee or also
Executive Steering Committee. Thank you. Okay, we're on item number 3 on the agenda. We'd like a progress report from the SAP Executive Steering Committee. Whoever would like to lead that has the floor.
Okay, as the acting project sponsor, I'm speaking to the Executive Steering Committee today. The actual new Executive Steering Committee has not yet had a meeting, as the mayor is still filling that committee and filling those positions. So I'm going to be doing the presentation for today's meeting. We put together a short presentation trying to, what we wanted to do is, with the project managers and myself, list what has been accomplished, the major accomplishments over the last 2 months. These are what has been being worked on and what the project team has been doing. So they've been working on project preparation deliverables, which are completed, and this phase is being closed out. Doing a document inventory of all the SAP-related documents and doing a project plan. We worked on the solution manager implementation and doing team training, getting solution manager up to where it needed to be and where it should be going forward.
Excuse me, can everybody hear? Okay, great. Thank you.
Whereas the as-built blueprint project and resource plans have been completed. We've commenced blueprinting workshops for both the HCM and finance and logistics. And for people who are new to this project and may not understand a lot of the acronyms we use, HCM stands for Human Capital Management. It is basically the HR and payroll system. FILO stands for Finance and Logistics. That is all of your financial and purchasing design decisions for the HCM, conducted enterprise structure design workshop. This is one of the major findings from the SAP QA, was to look at the enterprise structure and redo that, so there was a design workshop on that conducted. Completed 23 HCM master data design documents and submitted those for review and approval. There's approximately 200 finance and logistics documents that are prepared for workshops to begin. And we are starting to plan for an SAP QA gate check on the project preparation phase and blueprint progress. And SAP will be on site next week to conduct that. And they will be doing interviews with project managers and assessing where we are at with the blueprint and where we're at with the project plan, and giving us a report on what's been done and what the status is, any recommendations.
I have a question. When you say SAP will be on site, isn't SAP already on site?
Depends on which part of SAP you're talking about. This is the SAP QA team, the
Okay.
quality assurance team.
Okay.
They are the team that came in and did the quality assessment in January, and they're the team that we work with and have contracted with to do the gate checks and the quality assurance
Okay.
review. We have SAP consultants on site who are actually doing consulting, doing the project management. Tom Dale is an SAP employee, but it's a different section of SAP.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. Please continue.
This is just a brief overview of the status of the blueprint, what's been completed, and what we're projecting to be completed within the next 30 days. And this just breaks down just high level the various sections of what's being worked on. Yes, Amy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Glenda, can you tell us, I know we're in the middle of a transition, and you probably have noticed at the assembly level, basically everything SAP related has been put on hold, waiting for the current administration to get up to speed and make some decisions. What impact does that have on your 30-day completion, what you think is going to be?
Well, currently we're continuing to work on the blueprint. I have Kim Park, who is the Deputy Program Manager for the municipal employee, and I met with the new mayor and his team earlier this week, and we're meeting with him again on Monday in a work session to talk to him and help him get up to speed on this project. So we're working with them to decide where they want to go and to help educate them on what we're doing, where we're going, where we've been.
Sure. So even though we're pausing things at the assembly level in order to let them make some decisions or weigh in, ultimately, I guess I'm looking at our burn rate. How much is it costing us per day or per month as far as pausing the project? And with that question, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It's just, ultimately it may cost us a little upfront, but be a very good investment in the long term. I'm not sure. But what is our burn rate here?
Our burn rate is, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, because I don't have it with me, somewhere in the neighborhood of $240,000 a week. And that's just from my memory, so I may be a bit off on that. Put that disclaimer out there. But what we talked about with the mayor was looking at what we're burning, what our burn rate is right now, how we can streamline that to not stop the project, because there's huge risks in just stopping and waiting and pausing and putting everything on hold. But to come back to the mayor with a plan of how we can manage that burn rate and what the risks are of a reduced burn rate versus a complete stop versus moving forward at the rate we are at. And we're working on putting together a proposal on that for the mayor.
Sure. And if I may just follow up on that, when I'm talking about, I may not be using the terminology correctly, I'll admit that right up front, but when I'm talking about the burn rate too, some of that is going to be costing, no matter what. It's going to be costing working on the project. Is there a cost that's associated that you can quantify with us just pausing? Because out of this $240,000, I assume even if we were moving full steam ahead, that would be spent anyway. But what negative impact are we creating by holding this this up at the assembly level, I guess is what I'm asking.
The negative impacts that we're holding up and what we're doing by not moving forward on these decisions is we put the schedule at risk. When we don't make a decision and don't keep moving forward, that pushes out the go-live date. Sure. There are decisions that were deferred at the last assembly meeting, and we've got a slide on that later. HANA, the hack, the hosting, all of that. It basically delays implementation, delays getting to go live. There's a risk of that because the longer you go on this, the more it costs. You burn money every week. So, and discussions of doing a hard stop, saying everybody should shut down and go home. There's a big risk to that because if you turn off your consultants, you run a very high risk of not getting very qualified key consultants to come back. Once you close. These people are consultants. They don't get a paycheck unless they're on a job. If we shut it down and say, we're not going to give you a paycheck for 30 days, they're going to go look for another paycheck. So what we've talked about with Mayor is you don't want to run the risk of losing the key resources that have the history, that have the knowledge. Because then when you start back up, you have to get new resources, you have to bring back up to speed, they have to get re-familiar with the project, so it creates a further delay in the learning curve.
Sure. And I guess from my perspective, I've been willing to give the mayor a couple more weeks. You know, I know they had a couple months during their transition period where they had the opportunity to learn about the project, and I was willing to give them a couple more weeks to make a couple decisions. But ultimately, a decision needs to be made relatively soon. I know there's a lot to take in, so I think, honestly, the first decision that's going to be major for this administration is, do you go HANA or do you not? And that's the forking road for him. Because if he goes HANA, he's committed fully to SAP. And if he doesn't, and he has other options. So I'll be waiting for that decision, his input, and then I'll make my decision at the assembly level. But I appreciate the counsel that you give him, and we look forward to seeing what their thoughts are.
Anything else, Mr. Mbasi?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Mbasi. Please continue.
Okay. The next slide is just a brief summary of our current contractor staffing. We are actually looking at our current contractor staffing, looking at where the project's going, and looking where resources are needed or maybe not needed. I officially took over as sponsor for this project about a week and a half ago, so I've been spending a lot of time with our project manager and our deputy project manager looking at the resources, looking at where they're allocated, and we've been going through what do we need and how can we do this as efficiently and effectively as possible and as streamlined as possible. So these totals may change. It's broken down currently on one side by the vendor providing, the consultant, and then where they're working and what we're doing. So, like, one of the key areas we look at is Kronos. We currently have 17 men working on Kronos. That is 7. That is likely to change and shift as the focus of Kronos and what the administration wants to do with Kronos changes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trainee.
SAP timekeeping module we bought, we paid for it. Can these people be switched over to that if we decide we don't want to go forward with Kronos?
Yes, and what we're actually looking at is if a decision is made to not go forward with Kronos, that number will come down significantly. There's still some work to be done to actually define in detail and plain, clear language, what are the pay rules? Because you have to know what your bargaining unit pay rules are, no matter what system you do to pay. But I think we can actually shed at least several contractors off of this, depending on the decision on Kronos.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
Mr. Jackson,
Ms. Johnston?
what has been the completion rate as far as the Kronos? I thought even last year that there was already integration in the SAP project that had been completed. Am I wrong?
There is an interface that was built to SAP from Kronos. One of the big findings in the SAP QA review, however, was the way time is interfaced into SAP from Kronos and where time evaluation and basically the data is done. And the debate has been whether it's kept in Kronos where some rules are custom set up or moved into SAP for time evaluation.
Right, and but that question, I'm just saying that some of that interface has been completed, and with the Q&A, we always have to be aware that it's the vendor that's doing the Q&A. Is that correct?
It is one of the divisions of SAP that is doing the Q&A.
Yeah. Anyways, I think it's I'm not sure if I'm one or the other. I just started to see where work has been done and we might throw it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Trainee?
Ma'am, the Kronos, what version are we utilizing now? Is that compatible with our version of SAP? As I understand, the Kronos version may be different and not updated to the current version of SAP. And then there's a problem with the two talking.
I'm going to actually look at Troy because I don't know the exact version of Kronos. I am aware that the Kronos is on an older version and he's upgraded.
And I don't know the version either.
Roughly 6.2 or 6.1.
What, 6.2?
6.2.
And what do we have to have it upgraded to?
The recommendation from Kronos was to go to version 8.0. But that was also, through the chair, Mr. Trainee, that was, the purpose of that also was to improve the current processing within Kronos, not necessarily because of the integration between Kronos and SAP. So the 8.0 recommendation from Kronos was so that they could take improvements if the municipality decided to stay on Kronos in order to take full utilization of the Kronos functionality. That was the recommendation, was to move to 8.0. If the decision is made to do most of the processing in SAP, that upgrade would not be necessary.
Do we have the cost, Ms. Gray Jackson, on this?
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Not yet, but we're working on it. We had a preliminary document which is being vetted by OMB.
Any idea on the amount? Did you look at it?
Well, the preliminary dollar amount from implementation, and I think to a couple out years was like $7 million, but don't take that to the bank, please.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you. When we're talking about the interface of Kronos and SAP, the last update that I heard was they were still having issues at AFD with Telestat specifically, and that interface specifically hadn't been resolved yet. Is that still the status?
I do believe that is correct.
Yeah, that's an issue. You know, and I'll have to say I've been one of the ones saying for a long time that maybe Kronos should be scrapped, quite frankly. You know, and that was my recommendation to the mayor too. So I hope that's being looked at seriously. Sometimes when you have a complicated issue, the more variables you can eliminate, the easier the issue becomes.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. To follow up on Ms. Domboski's comment about dumping Kronos, we've had that conversation for quite some time now. Yes. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looked back at page 3 and I noticed that the 50 and HCM as-built were listed as being 100%. And then when I went over on page 4, I noticed that the 50 and HCM project organization team members, there were 9 each still listed. If those are complete, are we assigning other tasks to those folks, or just wondering?
Good question.
On slide 3, the FILO and HCM as-built documents, those are complete. That is the as it's configured today. We're still working on additional documents because some of that as-built was or some of the documentation is incomplete. What we had planned on, Tom, through the interject.
Through the chair, the 100% represent what we had referred to in some other documents earlier as a way forward. Essentially, it was a quality assessment of the document. They went through an inventory effort, got a hold of all the documents that had been developed over time, did a quality assessment to see, are they complete, are they where they need to be, and now the work continues to close the gaps for the time.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I have a couple of questions. Okay. On page 4, the team members, 40. And you said that 7 of those members are Kronos. Okay, and then I also believe that I heard you say that if we got rid of Kronos, those numbers would diminish significantly. Can you clarify that a little bit? I mean, how significantly?
I would say by probably 6.
In addition to the 7 members already working on Kronos?
No, we would take the Kronos number out.
Okay.
And basically what you would have is potentially one person documenting the time requirements, and then they would be done.
Okay, I'm glad I asked the question because I thought you meant team members in addition to the ones who are working on Kronos. So I'm glad thank you for the clarification. And my next question is, what's the executive steering committee's opinion on whether or not we should dump Kronos? And if you think that we should, how soon do you think that should happen?
Well, we don't have an official executive steering committee opinion because the executive steering committee has not met. I think the project team and the project management team probably has an opinion on Kronos. That really, there are options on Kronos, and it really depends on the administration's viewpoint and their policies where they want to go. There is the option to continue on the previous path of everybody swipes time, and we go on the path of Kronos is it for timekeeping. There is the option of completely dumping Kronos. There's also an in-between option where you just basically pare down Kronos to a time collection system for any departments where you actually need a start and stop time.
Okay, let me follow up. What's your opinion, since you're the only one from the steering committee here today, on dumping Kronos? And I understand it's just your opinion and not the administration's opinion.
My opinion,
Please.
personally, is that we should either drop Kronos or pare it down to just a very scaled-back time collection system.
Okay, and you said drop first, so I'm going to focus on that. Okay. So.
In the corner, Glenda.
I mean, it's.
Can I put a disclaimer? These are my viewpoints and do not
And
represent anyone else's.
that'll be on the tape, so not to worry. Okay, so if that happened, if the administration agreed with your personal opinion, if that happened, what's the significance in terms of moving everything that has been already put? I'm talking about the timekeeping module in terms of the union contracts, and I know that there's a whole lot of work that goes into putting that information into Kronos. What I'm asking is, what's the cost and the time? And I'm probably not being really clear, but I think you get what I'm trying to find out.
I don't have a cost estimate or a time estimate that I could give you today. We could put together a cost and time estimate on that and present it to you. I wouldn't want to just pull a number off the top of my head and then have to correct myself later.
All right. Well, here's the good news. We meet every month.
Mm-hmm.
So how about next month, if not before, you can put together something and provide that information for us, because I think that's really important. And I'm almost thinking that we probably need to have that information before the next meeting, if that's at all possible.
We will try to put something together.
That would be
before the
great,
meeting.
because there's been a lot of conversation held on dumping Kronos, and I'd just like to see that information sooner than later. Thank you. Please continue. Certainly.
For clarification, when you say Kronos, I presume it's both instances of Kronos and a data migration aspect of that too.
I'm not sure I understand your question. Sorry.
There's 2 instances of Kronos running. So when you say Kronos, you mean the whole, all environments involved in Kronos.
All of it. Thank you.
Okay, the next slide is just a very high-level budget status of where we're at as of this week. We have total conception date on this project, basically $2 million budget. We've spent, which includes internal MOA labor, $33.6 million. We have encumbered, committed to purchase orders, about $8.1 million.
Before you continue, I have a question. Does this include labor?
Yes.
Okay.
This includes
All labor.
MOA
Utilities?
labor, contracts,
Utilities?
anything and everything that has been worked on this project.
Okay, thank you. And before you continue, Mr. Trainee had a question or comment?
Since you hazard a guess on your opinion on Kronos, what's your opinion of HANA as a storage system? Because that'll come in front of us at the next assembly meeting.
Okay. My opinion on HANA is that we should actually follow the recommendation given by Gardner, and that we move forward and we move forward with HANA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
I'm just enjoying this, Madam Chair, because I'm watching Glenda over there. She's taking it like a champ.
Copies are typically available with Glenda later.
And frankly, I think that's a really good idea. You can continue, please.
Okay. We've also got pre-encumbered, which is on requisitions, about $3.8 million. The $3.8 million pre-encumbered includes all of the pending items, which includes the HANA, the HAC, and an AMS contract that did not yet come to the assembly for support services.
One comment, and then Mr. Trainee. I'm really, really happy to see this presented to us with the inclusion of labor. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
Kronos cost, though, is not included in here, is it?
No.
Okay.
This is purely SAP.
So we'd have to add in there, say, $7 million if that's what. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Please continue.
The next slide is just a breakdown of those costs. When done is done, just a summary, very high level again. You have the internal labor is about $9.1 million. Then it breaks down the professional services, software licenses, other contractual services, hardware, software, and some miscellaneous stuff. So we basically have $9.1 million of internal labor and $24.4 million of external costs.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Certainly.
Just to make sure I heard you right. So when we're talking about the budget that you presented, you are or are not counting in here as costs what's in front of the assembly right now?
The pre-encumbered includes what's in front of the assembly right now.
But not the Kronos part?
Not the Kronos part.
I see.
Thank you, Mr. Bo. Please continue.
Madam Chair, may I add a clarifying comment?
Certainly.
One thing that, and I think it did go to the question about the pre-encumberment not including any additional components, upgrade costs, but one thing to be clear about is that on the expenditures to date, any time worked in conjunction with Kronos, whether it was under the auspices of a time consolidation project or looking at time evaluation or currently collecting time requirements is commingled in here. Labor.
Thank you. Please continue.
The next slide is just a summary of some of the top issues we're looking at right now. Number one being executive leadership. The executive team is still in the process of formation and learning and understanding this project. So I'm going to continue as acting project sponsor until the mayor selects someone else. We have a meeting scheduled with the mayor on Monday to have further discussion on SAP and provide him with information on SAP. Second item is the infrastructure decision and the delayed items from Tuesday night, the HANA, the HEC, and where we're going to go with that. That decision does have a big impact on the project and the project timeline. Kronos and timekeeping is the other big issue and impact that really needs to be decided in order to move forward and complete this. And then the final issue is just technology issues and recurring issues with software licenses, hardware, platform, various internal IT issues. The PMO is working with the acting CIO to try to resolve all of those issues. And then finally, the upcoming and pending assembly requests. We have the two pending assembly items that were deferred until August 25th. There will be one additional item possibly coming up that we have prepared that did not make the agenda for Tuesday, and that is for SAP Application Management Services, or AMS as it's called, and that is for upgraded support services from SAP.
Any questions? Okay, so,
Take it out.
our next item on the agenda is proposed funding request and contracts, and it looks like this application management services is proposed funding request that may include contracts, correct?
It's a proposed contract.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit more about that for us under item 4 of our agenda?
Okay, the AMS is basically support and upgrade services from SAP. I think Troy is probably the best person to talk to the details of that, if you have detailed questions on that.
Well, I think this committee would like to hear the details. Thank you. Thank you, Troy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Through the chair, Assembly. Basically, the AMS contract is going to provide upgrade services and support services for the implementation of SAP. When we say upgrade, we basically have a system that we've been implementing over time that has had enough time transpire that we're going to have to provide for an upgrade midstream of that implementation.
Can you hold for a moment? Mr. Train has a question.
Now, this will give us the latest version of SAP when we go live, or do we have to buy another version to go live?
We will not have to buy another version. This is services just to provide the upgrade in this interim point of the project implementation stream. So once we achieve this, we will be current version of SAP at that time. So this fall, we would be on what's called Enhancement Pack 7. We're currently on Enhancement Pack 5. By reaching Enhancement Pack 7 during the implementation stream of this project, we will be able to better leverage the product and the configuration of that product. So there's things that they're considering on some of those previous slides of Linda's that would allow us to configure the system vanilla, is a term you hear sometimes used, something where we're not configuring or customizing the system and able to leverage the features of Enhancement Pack 7. So that's why we're doing it midstream. Once we achieve that, it would be the project and the city's intent to stay current with that product from that point forward and continue to keep pace with that product. So as we go across the project stream to go live, we would continue to apply the service packs and the various pieces of software upgrades on a continuous basis from that point forward. And that's the part of the support services that you hear about in this particular contract proposal. So the upgrade is a one-time event. Through the support services, we would stay current from that point forward.
Okay.
And there would be no additional buy.
I heard rumors about version 8 coming out.
There is an Enhancement Pack 8 that is some distant in the future. If you actually dig into the details of that, that is proposed, not scheduled, for the end of first quarter 2016, for example. As part of that, the city would leverage elements of that to continue to move the product forward. Those would come to us in the form of service packs during that continuous stream of applying service packs across time. So we would achieve that Enhancement Pack 8 through the application of the service packs as we continue performance on the contract.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trinity. Would you like to continue, or?
I think we've segued into what the rest of the contract is.
Okay.
So the upgrade services is a good third of it. There is some testing tools and some security analysis that are also part of the tool that would be mentioned in the AM and the departmental memo that I authored. That's a small third of, lesser than a third of the project. And then the greater portion of it is the support services. And those support services would be from this point through just prior to go live, to give us the necessary services to not only configure the system, but maintain those service packs that I mentioned and provide for all those that lead up to that go live point.
Mr. Trinity?
If we chose not to take HANA, is that going to increase its cost or reduce its cost or mess the whole thing up?
It's not going to mess anything up. It's not going to increase or diminish the cost that much. When you talk about going from Enhancement Pack 5 to 7, the amount of services that we're going to be engaged in are approximately the same. There's not a lot of differentiating costs there. What we would be doing is incurring a future cost, because HANA is a definitive future thing for us. Once we chose SAP, we are eventually going to go to HANA. The HANA upgrade would probably likely have to be scheduled in the 2019 timeframe. So we would barely get to go live and have to be thinking about a HANA upgrade because the current database platform is going to be deprecated out, and HANA will be the only choice by the 2019 timeframe. So that by not choosing HANA today, we're creating a future event. If
So
we
it's your
choose
advice to
HANA,
us, and we choose HANA now, that way we're ready to go.
we are there already in one event of not very differential cost at this time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Well, the bottom line is if we stay with SAP, and it looks like that's what's going to happen, not speaking for the administration, but on behalf of the Assembly, that we don't have any choice.
That is an accurate assessment.
Thank you. Would you like to continue?
I think I pretty much covered it. I would entertain any additional questions.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any other questions? I have a question. So when is this document coming before the Assembly?
We have it as a departmental memo already to purchasing. Purchasing is already drafted in AM. I think we're waiting on Glenda and their time with the mayor to have that proposed and move forward through the Assembly work.
So it hasn't gone through PACE yet?
I think it's
ready for,
It's-
it was, if I may, Madam Chair, the AM was prepared, it was ready to come to the Assembly at the last meeting, and the administration chose to defer it until they've had some time to review.
Well, I really appreciate that. I'm sure the committee does also, because this is part of our agenda items. So, with that said, so it really hasn't gone through PACE yet, because you're going to have a conversation with the administration about it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, the next item on the agenda is, does anybody else have any other comments before we go to audience participation? Mr. Trainee?
Just, Glenn, would you let us know as soon as possible the administration's recommendation on HANA?
I will.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Steele?
Do you want to get some input for him before we go to the audience participation?
I'm not sure if he wants to do it now, but Zig, Mr. Steele asked if you want to provide any input now, or do you want to do it in writing, or what's your preference?
Was that addressed to me?
Yes, Zig.
Yeah, I certainly think that I need to concentrate a little bit on all that rather than reacting.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Johnson, do you have any questions or comments?
No.
Okay, thank you.
You heard me. I don't know if I had it on now.
Yeah, we heard you. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Okay, audience participation. Anybody in the audience like to make a comment or ask a question? Or just wave? Thank you for being here. Okay, with that said, meeting adjourned.